You're listening to BitTalk, a podcast about Bitcoin, money, freedom, and the ideas that matter. I'm Mike, and I'm here for the signal, not the spin. Looking for a simple Bitcoin first way to buy, save, and learn? Swan Bitcoin is built for that. Start stacking with a platform focused on Bitcoin at swanbitcoin.com. All right, Lauren, I want to start today with something that stuck with me. I was talking to a friend last week, someone who follows markets, reads the news, considers himself financially literate. And he said, flat out, I can't imagine anyone using Bitcoin to buy groceries. That's just speculation. And I thought, that's a very comfortable position to hold when your own currency isn't evaporating in your hand.
It really is. And that's exactly the blind spot we want to address today. Because for millions of people right now, Bitcoin isn't a speculative side bet. It's the difference between having savings at the end of the month and having nothing.
Right, so today we're going to walk through a real-world account of someone using Bitcoin inside a hyperinflation economy. We're drawing from reported stories out of Venezuela, Lebanon, Argentina, places where the local currency has become a trap. And we're going to look at it from the user's perspective, how they acquire it, store it, spend it, and what it actually feels like.
And I want to be clear from the start. This isn't abstract economics. This is operational grit. It's people figuring out in real time how to preserve their labor's value when the state's money is actively failing them. So let's get into it.
So let's set the scene. Imagine you're a young professional in Caracas, Venezuela. You have a job, you earn bolivars. But the currency is losing value by the hour. Literally, price tags change in the middle of a transaction. Stores have to update their menus on paper because digital systems can't keep up.
And that's not hyperbole. There are documented cases where a cafe would write a price in pen at opening, and by lunchtime, they'd have to cross it out and write a higher number. The exchange rate against the dollar was moving so fast that any fixed price in bolivars was obsolete within hours.
So what do? You can't save in the local currency. It's melting. You can't easily access dollars. The government restricts that. So some people started turning to Bitcoin, not as an investment thesis, but as a life raft.
Exactly. And the first hurdle is just acquiring it. You can't walk into a bank and buy Bitcoin with your debit card. The banks are either hostile to crypto or effectively broken. So you go peer-to-peer. Maybe you use local Bitcoins. Maybe you join a Telegram group where vetted exchangers operate. You find someone willing to sell you Bitcoin at a premium, because that's the price of escape.
And the premium can be brutal. I've seen reports of 20-30% above the global spot price. You're already getting hammered by inflation, and then you pay a surcharge just to get into something that holds value.
Right. But here's the thing. Even at a 30% premium, you're still ahead within weeks if the local currency drops another 40%. The math works out because the alternative is certain loss. So people pay it. They have to.
And that leads us to the second piece. Once you've got Bitcoin, where do you keep it? Most people don't have a hardware wallet. They have a cheap Android phone.
Yeah, the image of a Bitcoin maxi with a ledger and a laptop is not the reality on the ground. In Venezuela, you see people using mobile wallets like Moon or Breeze. They're open source, non-custodial, and they work on relatively low-end hardware. Some people even keep a second old phone offline just to store the seed phrase.
Which brings up a really practical tension. On one hand, you want self-custody. You want to be your own bank. On the other hand, if your phone gets stolen or broken, you could lose everything. So you see people laminating their seed phrase and hiding it in a sock drawer or splitting it across two locations.
And that's not paranoia. That's survival. I remember reading a story about a guy in Argentina who kept his seed phrase inside a hollowed-out book on his shelf. He told the reporter, "If my apartment burns down, I'll still have my savings." That's the level of operational thinking that hyperinflation forces on you.
So let's talk about spending. Because once you've got Bitcoin saved up, you need to use it for daily life. How does that work when your landlord wants bolivars and the grocery store doesn't accept Lightning?
It's a patchwork. The most common approach is using Lightning Network for small transactions. There are apps like BitRefill that let you buy gift cards with Bitcoin for supermarkets, mobile top-ups, even utility payments. So you might buy a grocery store gift card with sats and then use that at checkout.
And there's also the informal economy. In Lebanon, for example, I've read about freelancers getting paid in Bitcoin by clients abroad, then using peer-to-peer exchange to convert just enough to local currency for rent and taxes. They keep the rest in Bitcoin.
That's the key insight. Almost nobody is fully Bitcoin only. They still need local currency for certain obligations, rent, taxes, maybe school fees. But the goal is to minimize exposure to the depreciating fiat. So you keep your savings in Bitcoin and you only convert a small amount when you have to pay a bill.
And there's friction. Lightning Network is fast and cheap, but it requires a channel, some liquidity. If the internet goes down, which happens, you're stuck. If your phone battery dies, you can't pay. These are real constraints.
Yeah, the sovereign individual meme doesn't account for a dead battery at the checkout counter. But people adapt. They keep a paper backup of their Lightning invoice. They know which cafes have a charger. It's improvisation, but it works well enough to be dramatically better than the alternative.
Which is losing your purchasing power by the day. Let's shift to the human impact, because I think this is where the story really lands. What does it feel like to have a savings account that actually holds its value when everything around you is falling apart?
There's a profound psychological relief. I've read interviews with Venezuelans who say they can finally plan ahead. Not in a speculative way, just, I know I can buy my daughter's school supplies in 3 months because that Bitcoin I bought today will still be worth something. That's dignity.
But there's also anxiety. The fear of losing your phone or getting scammed on a peer-to-peer trade. There are stories of people meeting strangers in parking lots to exchange cash for Bitcoin. One wrong move, and you're robbed.
That's real. And the government doesn't help. In some countries, owning Bitcoin is legal, but heavily taxed or restricted. Capital controls mean you can't move money out of the country easily. So you're navigating a minefield between state surveillance, criminal risk, and technical failure.
And yet, people still do it. The World Bank has data showing that billions of dollars in remittances flow through Bitcoin into countries like Venezuela and Nigeria. That's money that would have been eaten by fees and inflation otherwise.
Right. And that's the counterpoint to the digital gold ideal. It's not a perfect system, but when your choice is between losing 10% to a remittance service and then another 30% to inflation versus paying a small Lightning fee and holding value, the answer is clear.
So the trade-off is real, but the net effect is positive, dramatically so. Now, let's contrast this with the state money that's failing them. Unlimited printing versus fixed supply. Censorship versus permissionlessness. Centralized control versus self-sovereignty.
It sounds like a philosophy lecture, but when you're in a hyperinflation economy, it's lunch money. Bitcoin's fixed supply means that, unlike the bolivar or the lira, it can't be diluted by a central bank desperate to print its way out of a crisis. That's not theory. That's the difference between your savings lasting 6 months versus 6 days.
And the permissionless part, you don't need a bank account, you don't need an ID, you don't need to ask anyone for permission to save. In a country where the banking system is corrupt or collapsing, that's a lifeline.
Exactly. And here's where I want to push back on a common counterargument. Some people say, well, what about CBDCs? Couldn't a centrally controlled digital currency solve this?
Go ahead, take it apart.
All right, let me be blunt. The same state that caused the hyperinflation is going to issue you a programmable digital currency that they can freeze, surveil, and devalue at will. That's like handing the arsonist the fire hose. CBDCs are the opposite of a solution. They're the same problem with better technology for control.
And that's the philosophical edge. The state wants you to believe fiat is inevitable. But people experiencing hyperinflation learn the truth faster than anyone. Money that can be printed infinitely is not money. It's a tax.
Swan Bitcoin is built for people who want a serious Bitcoin-only approach. With recurring buys, Bitcoin IRAs, self-custody options like Swan Vault, and education designed to help you build conviction, Swan focuses on long-term Bitcoin savings, not crypto noise. Learn more at swanbitcoin.com.
And we're back. And we're back. So let's zoom out. What do these users, the ones actually living through hyperinflation, teach the rest of the Bitcoin community?
First, resilience. The same non-custodial wallets being used in Caracas are the ones recommended in San Francisco. The security practices are the same. The difference is urgency.
Second, education spreads organically. It's not white papers and Twitter threads. It's word of mouth in coffee shops. Someone shows a friend how to use Lightning to pay for a drink, and that friend teaches someone else.
Right. I saw a Reddit post recently from a Nigerian freelancer who pays his rent with sats. He explained how he found a landlord who accepts Bitcoin via Lightning, and now they both benefit. The freelancer avoids bank fees, and the landlord gets a savings asset. That pattern repeats all over the world.
And it creates a network effect. As more merchants accept Lightning, the loop tightens. You can earn in Bitcoin, spend in Bitcoin, and never touch the failing local currency except for unavoidable obligations.
But let's be honest, it's not a utopia. The friction is real. You still have to deal with tax reporting, even if you're using a P2P exchange. You still face internet outages. The technology isn't invisible yet.
No, it's not. But neither was email in 1995. And today, nobody argues that email is useless because of early spam problems. The trajectory matters.
And I think that's the through line of our earlier episodes. We've talked about Bitcoin's fixed supply, about privacy upgrades, about mining in Africa. Each time, the lesson is the same. Bitcoin works best where it's needed most. In hyperinflation economies, it's not an experiment. It's a proven tool.
So let's wrap this up. The key takeaway is that Bitcoin is not a perfect tool. It has friction, it has risks, and it requires operational discipline. But in extreme conditions, when the state's money is actively rotting, it outperforms on every dimension that matters: store of value, transferability, permissionlessness, and self-sovereignty.
And that's the frontier. It's raw, it's real, and it's irreversible. Once people have tasted the alternative, they don't go back. The state can try to control it, but the genie is out of the bottle.
Thanks for spending time with us on BitTalk. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep stacking knowledge.